Good day to all. I am Ms. Vinitha from the PG Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Manjeri. This presentation is part of my effort to help final BA English students of Calicut University understand sentence patterns in English. Just taking you back to my previous presentation on Introduction to Grammar, where we spoke about prescriptive and descriptive grammar. And as a recap, once again, we are going back to the definition of grammar. We defined grammar as the sum total of the patterns that constitute the structure of the language and the processes that yield the patterns. There are three words in the definition that you must place focus on. One is patterns, which I have all formatted using red color in bold. Second word is structure, and the third one is processes that yield the patterns. As students of BA English Language and Literature, we must be able to understand a correct structure from a wrong one and identify different sentence patterns. This comes only with regular reading and other practices like listening and speaking. Let's look at an example, my new car, in which you can identify the pattern as determiner, adjective plus noun. My is called determiner in English. New is a word that describes the noun, so you call it an adjective, and car is a noun. As a second sentence, I want you to look at he has broken a mirror. This sentence can be marked with the pattern SVO. As a part of learning grammar, let's understand that this placement of subject, verb and object in a specific order is a process. The agreement between the subject he and the verb has broken is also a process. These processes are stated in the form of rules in grammar. Patterns in English can be represented on the basis of different categories. We can look at what is relevant to you as per your syllabus and understand three categories: the formal, the functional, and the structural. If we recognize a category based on the form of the word, it may be referred to as a formal category. That is the definition I have given on top. Formal labeling of a sentence is based on the form of the word. Now, what are the forms that we must be familiar with to do this? You must be familiar with the word parts of speech or word classes, which is part of your syllabus. So, parts of speech or word classes like noun, verb, adjective, adverb, adjectival phrase, preposition, etc. are all formal labels. So, formal labels are based on parts of speech, and it refers to the internal structure of a unit or a sentence. So that is why in the first example you read in this presentation, we identified the pattern of my new car as determiner plus adjective plus noun. This is a formal and labeling based on formal category. Let's see an example. John wanted to buy a book from Peter. If you look at the formal labeling in this case, what will it look like? Just take a few seconds to identify the form of each word. Like you must think, what is the form of John? What is the form of wanted? What is the form of to buy, a book, etc. Done? Now, if you have done your formal labeling, it must look like this. You will have 3 nouns in the sentence. John is a noun, wanted is a verb, to buy is a verb, a is an article, book is a noun, from is a preposition, and Peter is a noun. If you look at the 3 nouns in the sentence and think about the meaning in the sentence, I want you to think a little bit further. Do all these nouns serve the same function? So now you are looking at the 3 words in the sentence that have the same forms. All these are nouns. But when you look at their position and their function in the sentence, are they the same? Let's go deeper into it. Your answer must be no. So we go to the next category, and this labeling is based on the function of a word or a phrase and what function does it perform in a sentence. We can call this labeling as the structural or the functional labeling. Further classifications of functional labeling are structural functional and logical functional, which we may study in some other context. It is in this labeling that we use terms like subject, object, predicate, adjunct, etc., where the label refers to the place of a word form in the structure of a sentence. I repeat, we use terms like subject, object, predicate, adjunct, etc., where the labeling refers to the place of a word form in the structure of a sentence. So the noun in John, what is its place in the previous example? Would you like to see the previous example? John wanted to buy a book from Peter. So if you look at this sentence again, you can see that John is the subject of the sentence and book is the object. Now let's try to explain with an example and try to give a formal label and a functional label to this sentence. 2 seconds, just give it a try. Mohan bought the old building. What does your label look like with the functional labeling? Try to give this sentence a functional labeling. Okay, so it can look this way. Functional labeling can be subject and the predicate, or some of you must have written it is having a subject, verb, object function. And your formal labeling will show all the word classes or parts of speech that have gone into the patterning of this sentence. So Mohan bought the old building has got a formal labeling that looks like noun, verb, article, adjective, and a noun. I hope we all are familiar with the articles in English. We have a, an, and the, which serves as articles of English. I hope it's now clear to you that a word or a group of words may perform one function or role in a given sentence and a different function or role in another clause or a sentence. Now, wear your thinking hats now. This is a question I want you to think about. Can we do functional labeling without seeing and understanding the meaning of a sentence? I repeat my question. Can we do the functional labeling of a sentence without seeing and understanding the meaning of a sentence? Your answer must be no. Why? To make this clear, let's try a real life analogy. Think about a man or a woman and the different roles they handle in their life. A man, for example, can be a son, a friend, a brother, a father, a neighbor, husband, a colleague, a professional, a lover, or he can even be a stranger. Whereas when you think about a woman, she too can handle different roles in one role as a woman. She can be a grandmother, she can be the beloved of someone, can be the wife, a sister, mother, colleague, neighbor, a fellow traveler, stranger. So in one role as a man or a woman, you can handle different positions and your functions vary according to what role you are handling in a particular context. So what is this based on? I mean, the role that you play in a particular context is based on what? Easy to explain. It's based on relationships. Similar is the function of word forms in different sentences. Only by understanding the relationship with other parts of the sentence can you recognize the functional category. So your previous question, can we give a functional label to a word or a group of words unless we see and understand the sentence? No, we cannot. We have to understand the structure and the semantic or the meaning of the sentence to give a functional labeling to a sentence. So based on this will be our study of sentence patterns in English. We can start with the simplest pattern and explain a few others which will but help you identify any complex sentence in English. Let's look at the smallest sentence in English. Birds fly. Now keep aside the formal labeling for some time, because in your study of the grammar of sentences, we have to study the grammar of sentences and the patterns in English. So hereafter we'll be talking about the functional labeling or the structural labeling and the patterns of sentences in English, which is part of your syllabus. Analyzing the sentence, birds fly, how will you label them? Simple. Birds form the subject of the sentence and fly is the verb. So the basic sentence pattern of the sentence birds fly is an SV pattern. So from an examination point of view, if a sentence is given to you, your step number 1 will be reading the sentence 2 or more than 2 times till you understand the meaning and the relationship between words or groups of words in the sentence. Here there are only 2 words to understand, birds and fly. So we are talking about a subject and what it does. SV pattern. So when you write the answers, you must write this serves as a subject, this serves as a verb, or so and so. So the pattern of the sentence is SV, where S stands for the subject and V stands for the verb. Let's look at a second sentence. Penguins are birds. Just take 2 seconds to understand what is the pattern. Penguins is the subject, are is the verb, and birds serve as the complement. Now there are 2 things that some of you might be confused about. One may the word complement. I want you to notice the spelling. This is not COMPLIMENT. Complement is a praise. This one is COMPLEMENT. So some of you might find it confusing to accept are in this sentence as a verb. Penguins, subject, are is a verb, and birds is a complement. Now, why do we consider are as a verb? In English, be is used as a main verb. I mean be, or an auxiliary verb. The different forms of be include am, is, are, was, were, been, and being. I repeat, the different forms of the main verb or auxiliary verb be, B-E-R, am, is, are, was, were, been and being, B-E-E-N and B-E-I-N-G. And we use be to express a permanent or a temporary quality or a state. Like when you say, my father is old, or the weather was terrible, or in the previous example, penguins are birds, we are expressing a quality or a state. So here, are is a form of the basic verb be. So what is the sentence pattern? We call it an SVC pattern, or the subject verb complement pattern. Now I have given a subscript S next to the complement. Now what does that mean? Now complement, I'll explain it in the coming slides. A complement can be completing or giving extra meaning either to the subject or the verb or the object. So depending on the extra information or the completion given by the complement either to the subject, to the object or the verb, we use 3 subscripts below the word see. In this case, penguins are birds. Birds is the complement that supports or adds information to penguins. So, when you are writing the structure of a sentence, you have to write this sentence structure. This sentence has the pattern SVC, and you put a subscript S and explain subject, verb and subject complement. So in the next slide, I can give you a little bit of explanation about what is a complement, because it is important to know what is a complement. I'm reminding you of the spelling once again. It is not P-L-I, but it is P-L-E. Something that is required to make something complete. That is the meaning of the word complement. Now it's easy to understand. Some verbs like be, become, seem, etc. do not have an object, but they only have a complement. So how do we represent this when you talk about sentence patterns? Capital C with a subscript S if it's a subject complement, or subscript O if it's an object complement. So should we go back to the sentence once again? The subject complement is a word or a phrase that tells us more about the subject. So here we have marked birds as subject complements because the word birds complete the sentence by explaining the penguins. Therefore, we call it as the subject complement. Now let's try another example. Look at this sentence. Alan is a nice person. Can you try the sentence pattern there? Alan, subject, is verb, and a nice person is taken as the complement. I hope it is clear now, because a nice person is a part of the sentence or a group of words that that give a completion to Alan. What is Alan? So we call it as subject verb, subject complement. Now let's try another sentence. Identify the sentence pattern in children love penguins. I hope it's getting easier now. Children is the subject, love is the verb, and penguins are the object. So the pattern will be SVO. Another sentence. Sheila got Kumar a present. I'm sure you understand. Sheila is the subject, got is the verb. So what next? Kumar a present. So if you're confused about the next part, don't worry. In English, we have got 2 types of objects. One is a direct object and another one is an indirect object. I'll just give the definition of what is a direct object. You can take it down, and whenever you understand or read a sentence, just have this idea in your mind. You don't have to memorize the definition, but an understanding is good for you to read more and to write better. A direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of the verb or that shows the result of the action. I repeat, a direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of the verb or that shows the result of the action. Or a direct object tells what or whom after a transitive verb. So that's easy for you to understand. Now remember, a direct object is also a kind of complement. It completes the meaning of a transitive verb. So a direct object is a complement, and objects can be of two forms, direct object and indirect object. If it is the direct objects that tells you what or whom after a transitive verb. So here in this sentence, you saw Sheila got Kumar a present. Now, what did Sheila get? Sheila got Kumar or Sheila got a present? Which word answers the question or the result of the verb? So the word that answers the question of what will be the direct object and other will be the indirect object. In this way, the sentence pattern will look like subject, verb. Kumar here will be the indirect object and present will be the direct object. So we have given the subscription I next to O for the indirect object and the subscript D for the direct object. So your sentence pattern must be written like this. S, V, O capital letter, subscript I indirect object, O capital letter again, and D small letter as the subscript. Now I will also read for you or tell you what is meant by how will you define an indirect object. An indirect object is a noun or a pronoun that comes between the verb and the direct object and tells to what, to whom, or for what or for whom the action of a verb is done. I'll repeat. An indirect object is a noun or a pronoun that comes between the verb and the direct object and tells to what or to whom or for what or for whom the action of the verb is done. So Sheila got a present. For whom? For Kumar. So here Kumar becomes the indirect object. I hope it's clear now. These basic understandings, just keep them clearly in your mind. Let's try a few more patterns in English. I hope it's getting easier now. Sheila appointed Kumar her secretary. So Sheila is a subject, appointed is the verb. Appointed what or to whom or how did you do that? Done? Now check your answer. It is a subject, verb, the object and the complement. So the pattern will be SVOC. She appointed whom? Kumar. That is the direct object. And the rest is something that complements or completes the sense of what was Kumar appointed as. So we call it as a complement. So your sentence pattern will be SVO complement to the object or to the object complement. Because the word her secretary is explaining not Sheila but Kumar. Penguins live in the Antarctic. So please remember, we mentioned earlier that we need to identify the relationship between parts of the sentence or the word forms to identify the sentence structure. I hope this sentence is easier now. Penguins live in the Antarctic. Penguins subject, live is the verb. And how did you mark in the Antarctic? We can call it as complement. But in here, this is complementing or completing the sense of the word live. So we call it SVCA, which means it's an adverbial complement. Adverb is a word that adds more to the verb. So where do they live? In the Antarctic. Because the group of words in the Antarctic adds more information to live, we call it a complement, or because it completes the sense of the verb, we call it a complement. And because it is adding an information relevant to the verb, we call it an adverbial complement. So when you write it down, when you explain the sentence pattern, it must be written as SVC, all in capital letters, subscript A, and in your explanation you must write, this sentence has a sentence pattern subject, verb, adverbial complement, where penguins serve as a subject, live serves as the verb, and in the Antarctic is a complement which is completing the sense of the verb the verb live, and therefore it is marked adverbial complement. We are almost coming to the last part of this presentation. Based on what we have discussed so far, we can understand that certain elements are essential in the structure of a sentence, and when one of them is removed, the remaining part will not be regarded as a meaningful sentence. Or when some parts of a sentence are removed, they become unacceptable. Such elements of a sentence can be termed as nuclear elements in a sentence. So in your sentence patterns, if you give a quick guess, which ones will you identify as the nuclear elements of a sentence? Did you think about these? Subject, verb, object, and complement. Now the verbal includes both the auxiliary verbs and the main verbs in a sentence. Auxiliary verbs and main verbs you must have learned when you studied the parts of speech, or if not, we will talk about it in some other context. So subject, the verbal, the object, and the complement are all referred to as the nuclear elements in any sentence. Against these nuclear elements, we have the marginal elements, and these elements can be called adjuncts. In grammar, adjuncts are those parts of a sentence which can be omitted without damage to the basic structure of the sentence. Or in other words, if an adjunct is dropped, we still will be left with a grammatically acceptable sentence. We identify them to mark the sentence. So look at an example to see how does an adjunct work when you are identifying the structure of the sentence. But remember, you can construct beautiful, meaningful, highly descriptive sentences using adjuncts. So they are not useless, but when it comes to, we are talking strictly about sentence patterns in grammar. So adjuncts are marked as the features called marginal elements. Now look at these two sentences. Children love penguins. What is the sentence pattern? Very easy. It is SVO. But I can add an adjunct to make it semantically richer or more beautiful. Or I can make it children love penguins immensely. Now this immensely can be referred to as an adjunct or an object complement. And even when you remove the adjunct, the sentence will still look meaningful. But if you are marking the sentence, you can mark it as SVOA, or I think more in keeping with your syllabus, you can mark it as SVO, adverbial complement. A quick understanding of the difference between adjuncts and complements. Adjuncts and complements are different. An adjunct is not necessary, but it adds extra information, whereas a complement is necessary in order to complete the meaning. Look at this sentence, for example. He put some salt in the soup. It might look like an adjunct to you, but if you remove in the soup, the sentence will not make complete sense. So here the sentence pattern is S, V, O and C. It's not adjunct, it is a complement, or it's an object complement. Now let me make you understand the whole concept with a few more sentences. And remember, adjuncts add fine details to descriptive writing or creative writing and even your academic writing. Before we wind up, let's try a few more sentence patterns. The committee appointed Lakshmi Vice President. Make a quick guess. Which is the subject, which is the verb, which is the complement? If there is a complement, what kind is it? The first one is, it's an object complement. Aishwarya Rai is stunningly beautiful. Don't look at this as an opinion, this is only a sentence. So it is subject, verb, and it is a subject complement. Stunningly may be looked upon as an adjunct. The girl in the news is Renuka, which is a subject in here. Now, maybe you are aware that a subject can be a simple subject as well as a complex subject, a compound subject. So, the girl in the news is a subject in the sentence, is the verb, and the other one is the subject complement. So, the sentence pattern is S, V, and C, which is a subject complement. Could you make me a coffee? This is a question pattern, and your sentence pattern should look like subject, verb, indirect object, direct object. She keeps the house clean has a sentence pattern, sentence, verb, object, and an object complement. Tara was reading Grey's Anatomy yesterday. Even if you remove yesterday, the sentence will still look complete. Grey's Anatomy is the object. So, because yesterday has come in as an extra information, we can call it as an adjunct. This is not the end of it. There are umpteen sites on the web that helps you practice more. If you have something to share with me, please write through mkvinitha@outlook.com. Till we meet again, stay home, stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you all for your patient listening.